evening, everybody. Great to have you all with us. Thanks you all for coming out. I am outdoor for you, so I hope you can hear me in the back. If you can't, move forward, because this isn't church. Okay, move forward if you can't hear me. But it's great to have you here for our national, or our hurricane forum. It's even greater to have some of our partners with us. But before I introduce them, I want to thank Chairman Bob Wood for being with us. Bob is the chairman of the Delaware County Board of Management. My presentation, he's one of the senior leaders been through this many a time. So thank Bob for being with us. And Bobby Allen is here somewhere. He's probably hiding in the back. Bobby Allen, our county manager. So it's great to have them with us. For those folks, I know there's a couple here from Currituck. Thank you all for coming down from Currituck to be with us. But we're Dare County. Currituck's a little different, but you'll get that. We'll all get through this together. But really great to have you with us for a hurricane forum. It's it's not just Dare County Management pulling this together. It's really our partners, the National Weather Service. Eric Hayden is our warning coordination meteorologist, and he's running the gadgets. So he was able to bring Mike Brennan in from afar. I just want to thank Mike Brennan from the Hurricane Center. I'll do just a quick intro of Mike. Mike, I believe he's a Virginian, decided to leave Virginia and go to school in North Carolina, went to North Carolina State. I can't remember the years, but in a short period of time, he went from being an undergraduate to having a doctorate. And I'm lucky enough to have been able to go down to the Hurricane Center and sit in on some of the trainings they do about 4 or 5 years ago. And Mike was an instructor. I think Bob has been down to that training as well. But when you go down to the Hurricane Center to learn about hurricanes, you've got people like Mike Brennan, the director, teaching you about hurricanes. And they teach it on a personal level, not at the PhD level. They get it down to the person, the understanding it. And it's not just Mike and the folks down at the Hurricane Center who do it. It's our warning coordination meteorologist, Eric Hayden from the National Weather Service down in Newport, or Ed City, who does it. But I got to do a pitch in here before we get started. This is not a little. This is just a reality. The National Weather Service, how much do you think it costs you each year out of your pocket to fund the National Weather Service? $4. $4. So if you bought a cup of coffee at Starbucks today, you might pay about that much. Please support the National Weather Service. You can talk to elected officials anywhere. The National Weather Service is a key partner. Their director, Ken Graham, said, and he says it all the time, we stand with emergency management. We are in it together for public safety officials. So please support the National Weather Service. That's what we hear. Without them, we can't get this on together. More important, we don't have those on-the-spot forecasts we need. So with that, Eric said, thank you for being here. Mike, thanks for being with us. And I'll hand it off to Eric to do a little more.
Really appreciate everybody being here. A few housekeeping items, then we'll turn it over to Director Brennan. Exits are back to your left or to the right. Exits all around if you need so. Mike, just so you know, we had 75 people signed up. We have, looks like, close to that right now. So we have a great audience. We are recording this. We do plan to put this on YouTube. Director Brennan's going to speak first. Then I'm going to give you a local perspective, and then Director Drew Pearson's going to speak. If your neighbor's not here, if you have to step out, if somebody comes late, remind me, we are recording this like we do every year, and it's on our YouTube channel, so you can certainly watch it there. So, Mike, take it away. I really appreciate you presenting. We're looking forward to the presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Eric, and thanks, Drew, and I really appreciate the invitation and the opportunity to speak with you all today. You know, from here, and it's not so sunny Miami this afternoon. We've been getting a lot of rain from the system out of the Atlantic that's crossing over Florida. But we live the hurricane problem along with all of you in Eastern North Carolina down here in South Florida every year. And I just want to say a quick word. You know, there was a lot of kind words from both Drew and Eric about what we do here. But I think for those of you in Dare County, Drew is one of the top-notch emergency managers in the United States. And we're really lucky to have him and so many folks like him around the country that are able to take the information that we provide about tropical storms and hurricanes that get, you know, localized by the great folks like Eric at the WFO there at Weather Service office in Newport, and really turn that into actionable information to keep you safe in your local community. And that's how the process really works. It's not just the meteorology, it's not just the information about the storm, but it's information about how the storm is going to affect you, and to get that information to you in a way you can understand and take actions to keep you safe. And And we get the chance to work with a lot of weather forecast offices around the National Weather Service, and the one there in Newport is top notch. And Eric is one of the best morning coordination meteorologists in the country, and we're really lucky to be part of the larger National Weather Service team with all of them there. So thanks for the opportunity to talk with you all today. I'm going to cover, as my title says, a little bit about the 2025 seasonal outlook, even though we're a month and a half into the hurricane season as of today. Talk about some of the products and services that'll be new from the Hurricane Center this season, and some recent impacts in North Carolina in general, but in coastal North Carolina and the Outer Banks in particular. So if we take a look back at last year, maybe one of the busier, more impactful hurricane seasons we've seen in the United States in quite some time. This is the map of all the storms, but you can kind of remember that obviously everybody in North Carolina knows all about Helene and the catastrophic impacts it produced in the western part of the state. But we actually had 5 U.S. hurricane landfalls in the U.S. last year, and they were all along the Gulf Coast. We had Beryl, we had Francine, we had Milton, we had Debbie, and we had Helene. 3 of those made landfall in Florida, 1 in Louisiana, and 1 in Texas. And there were 10 hurricane landfalls across the basin, and 5 in international areas across the Caribbean, and even up into Mexico and into Bermuda. And it was a very impactful season overall, with 18 named storms, 11 hurricanes, 5 major hurricanes. But you can see there was a lot of activity in the western part of the basin, across the Gulf, and in the Caribbean. We had a lot of storms form in that region. And when those storms form there, they don't really have a way to escape very easily without affecting land somewhere. And there were over 400 fatalities across the basin, and over 350 of those were in the United States. If we take a little bit more of a step back and look back to the period from 2017 to 2024, we've been in a remarkable period of U.S. hurricane activity. The map you see here is the tracks of the 25 hurricane landfalls that have made hurricanes that have made landfall in the United States during that time. And 11 of those were major hurricanes, category 3, 4, or 5. And while you can see that most of those were along the Gulf Coast and in Florida, we have had several storms actually affect the southeastern coast of the United States. We had Florence, we had Dorian that made landfall in portions of the Outer Banks. And in addition to the hurricanes you see here, we've had about 20 tropical storm landfalls. And not to minimize the impacts of Gulf Coast landfalls, because they can be some of the most impactful storms that produce inland impacts, as we saw in Helene last year, and inland portions of the Carolinas and into the southeastern United States. And from these 25 hurricanes and the tropical storms, we've had about 670 direct fatalities in the United States during this time, and about 560 indirect fatalities. And we'll get into the difference of what those terms mean in a few minutes here. And in terms of damage, these storms have been responsible for more than $800 billion in damage to the U.S. during this time period. And that comes out to more than $100 billion per year. So very, very impactful period, both from a human impact and economic impact for the nation. So let's take a step back and talk a little bit about Helene. Helene was the most impactful hurricane to strike the United States since Katrina in 2005, in just about any way imaginable, but certainly in terms of the fatalities that it wrought. This is a map of the direct fatalities from Helene, the ones that are directly due to the forces of the storm itself, the wind, the freshwater flooding, storm surge, tornadoes, those direct impacts. And what you can see is that while Helene made landfall in the Florida Big Bend region, the vast majority of the fatalities occurred in Georgia, upstate South Carolina, and especially in western North Carolina. And with just a few fatalities in Florida, several due to storm surge, hundreds of miles away from where landfall occurred in the Tampa Bay region, a few due to wind. But in terms of the wind, and we'll talk more about the flooding in a minute, Helene was the deadliest hurricane to hit the United States from a wind perspective since at least the early 1960s, as long as we've been kind of keeping track of detailed records of fatalities. There were 65 wind fatalities from Helene, 8 of them in western North Carolina. Most of them were in Georgia and South Carolina, with a few scattered in other locations as well. Almost all of these were due to trees falling on people, either outside or in their homes or in their cars. If we look at the storm surge, Helene was a large, powerful hurricane that hit one of the more storm surge vulnerable portions of the United States coastline, the west coast of Florida. And we issued a storm surge warning for Helene about 40 hours prior to the water levels rising. And we predicted, and you can see this image on the right, we predicted more than 15 feet of inundation above ground level in this area up here in the Big Bend coast. And that storm surge was realized in some areas in that region. And there were no storm surge fatalities in that area where the highest storm surge occurred. But there was record-breaking storm surge in Tampa Bay, again, hundreds of miles down the coast with inundation of as much as 7 feet above ground level. And we had 14 storm surge fatalities, all in that Tampa Bay region. Again, very vulnerable, and the Tampa Bay region being a very populated part of that vulnerable area of the Florida coastline. The freshwater flooding, I think, though, is what most people think of when they think of Helene, particularly in Western North Carolina, with catastrophic impacts and widespread rainfall totals over the western part of the state of 20 to 30 inches. That just caused a catastrophic flooding event with extreme flash flooding, river flooding. We had over 60 stream and river gauges exceed their record flood levels across portions of the southern Appalachians. And we had 95 fatalities from freshwater flooding and landslides. And that's what this map shows here is from the USGS. All of these dots are landslides that occurred due to the heavy rainfall associated with Helene. 78 of those freshwater flooding and landslide fatalities occurred in Western North Carolina, with 15 in Tennessee and 2 in South Carolina. And Helene was the deadliest hurricane in terms of freshwater flooding in the United States, going back to Agnes in 1972. So, it's in that category with storms like Camille, Agnes. It surpassed the freshwater flooding fatalities that we saw in Hurricane Harvey in Texas just in 2017. So this will come out a little more when we start talking about fatality trends, both nationally and for North Carolina as well. So why was Helene such an impactful storm, going back to the wind impacts? So Helene was a powerful, large hurricane moving very fast. Its speed at landfall along the northern Gulf Coast was more than twice the average speed. Most storms in that part of the Gulf are moving at around 12 miles per hour when they make landfall. Helene was moving at almost 30 miles per hour. So because the storm weakens at a sort of a steady rate after landfall, and Helene was a Category 4, it was moving very quickly, and so it carried those strong winds very, very far inland, especially in wind gusts. We saw wind gusts over 100 miles per hour in western parts of North Carolina. But even at lower elevations, places like Augusta, Georgia, had wind gusts of over 80 miles per hour. And again, that's where the vast majority of those wind fatalities occurred, in portions of eastern Georgia and central and western South Carolina. So if we talk about fatality trends overall in the United States, these are those direct deaths that are caused directly by the forces of the storm itself, from storm surge, freshwater flooding, wind, tornadoes, etc. So if you look at the pie chart here, there's been about 660 fatalities in the US during this 11-year period. And most of them have been due to freshwater flooding. And this was even the case before Helene, but Helene has certainly added to that trend. About 54% of the fatalities in the US are due to freshwater flooding from heavy rainfall. Wind, storm surge, and rip currents are each responsible for about 10 to 20% of the fatalities. It's noteworthy that storm surge itself now has been responsible for only about 10% of the deaths during this time period, with about 66 fatalities, and the vast majority of those occurred in Hurricane Ian in Lee County, Florida on a single day. I think there were about 40 fatalities there. So outside of that event, storm surge mortality has been really, really low in the United States, considering that we've had so many hurricane landfalls and multiple major hurricane landfalls in very storm surge sensitive areas. Surf and rip currents have been an emerging threat. We're going to talk a little bit more about those in a couple minutes. And Helene, with its large number of wind fatalities, but we also had a large number of wind fatalities from Milton and Beryl and Francine last year. That really did increase the proportion of wind deaths that we've seen in recent years, really pushing that number up from about 10 to 15% up to about 20%. So again, you can see it's sort of a widespread cause, but most of the fatalities, even with that increase on the wind side, most of the fatalities in tropical storms and hurricanes happen from water in some way, shape, or form, either the freshwater flooding, storm surge, or surf and rip currents. If we look at the indirect fatalities, these are the deaths that are caused not directly by the forces of the storm itself, but by conditions or dangerous conditions or situations that occur largely after a major hurricane or a storm has affected the area. And that wouldn't have otherwise happened if there hadn't been a hurricane. And the first thing that jumps out is that the number of indirect deaths is almost as big as the number of direct deaths. Over 550, 560 indirect fatalities. Remember, the direct number was over 600. So they're on the same order of magnitude. And that means we're losing almost as many people after storms as we are during storms. But you can see from the pie chart here, these fatalities are really spread out across a wide variety of causes. But most of them occur after major hurricane landfalls and are really tied to power outages, widespread power outages. The biggest causes of fatalities are simply accidents. People falling off their roof, people having an accident while cleaning up, or less often preparing for the storm. But those recovery and preparation accidents here are responsible for about 17% of the fatalities. Then you get into fatality causes that are due to power, lack of medical access, post-storm heat, carbon monoxide poisoning. Those are all responsible for about 10% of the deaths. And actually, one of the other leading causes of fatalities is car accidents. People driving around largely after the storm in an unsafe environment where there may be roads washed out, there may not be power, cars running into trees that are down over the roadway. So again, just affecting those large, again, just symptomatic of a very dangerous post-storm environment. And I know, from the emergency management side, Drew will probably tell you that's one reason why people are asked to evacuate in hurricanes, in addition to get them away from the storm surge threat, is that so you don't have people left in an unsafe environment after the storm where there may not be power, water, emergency services, people to come help you if you have a problem. And so that's just another reason to heed those evacuation orders there, or advice that you're given by your local officials. And if you look at the demographics of the indirect fatalities, that disproportionately affect men, especially older adults as well. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So if we zoom into North Carolina, there have been about 170 direct fatalities during this time period. And as we talked about, the vast majority of them are due to Helene. About half, well, not the vast majority, about half actually are due to Helene, 86 of them. Most of the ones from Helene were freshwater flooding, although there were a fair number of wind. And again, the next highest fatality causing storms going back in this period from 2013 to 2024 are Matthew and Florence, with a combined 40 fatalities. And those were largely due to freshwater flooding. But you'll see we have had a large number of rip current fatalities. North Carolina is one of the leading states for rip current and surf related fatalities related to hurricanes in particular, along with Florida and New Jersey. And you can see the wind fatalities in there as well, and 3 fatalities from tornadoes. But what you'll note is there haven't been any storm surge fatalities in North Carolina during this period of time, despite several storms affecting the area, several events where we've had significant storm surge. Not just in the Outer Banks, but up portions of the Neuse River, if you think back to Florence. And so we've really been able to keep that storm surge mortality low. This is a map of where those direct fatalities have occurred across the state during that time period. They're kind of spread evenly across the state in a pretty consistent way, although obviously the larger numbers are clustered out in Western North Carolina, especially in the Asheville area, due to the large number of fatalities from Helene. But other than that, they're really spread quite evenly across the mountains, the foothills, the Piedmont, the coastal plain, even out into the Outer Banks and down into the southeast coast. And just wanted to touch quickly on the surf and rip current fatalities, specifically the ones that have happened in Dare County. There have been 5 in this data set during this time period, again, tied specifically to tropical storms and hurricanes. 1 from Chris in 2018, 3 from Adalia in 2023, and 1 from Bertha in 2014. And you can see they're kind of spread out across much of the Outer Banks of Dare County there. If we zoom in on North Carolina for the indirect fatalities, the trends are pretty similar to the rest of the national statistics. There have been about 65 indirect deaths in North Carolina during this time. Relatively low compared to some other states. Florida has had by far the most indirect deaths, over 200, I think, during this time period because of the large number of major hurricane landfalls. But in North Carolina, a quarter of the indirect deaths are due to vehicle accidents, like we talked about before. Another 25% 24% are due to, again, just general accidents. So the other ones that stick out are medical access, cardiac arrest or cardiac issues, power problems or electrocution, and 5 fatalities actually are related to evacuation itself. I mean, people that have accidents or pass away due to the stress caused by the evacuation effort. If we look at the indirect fatalities, again, the trend across the state is largely the same, kind of spread evenly. We don't actually have any indirect fatalities along those coastal areas, or many on the coastal areas in the Outer Banks, largely because for big storms, at least, most people get out, and so they're not left in that dangerous environment after the storm. So that's, again, reinforcing those evacuation decisions there. If you look at the direct and indirect fatalities by age during this time period in North Carolina, you can again see it disproportionately affects older adults. The highest numbers are for people in their 60s, followed by 70s. But if you look at 60 and over, that's going to be most of your direct and indirect fatalities put together. Younger demographics are affected, but not quite in as large of numbers. And then the indirect fatality count, you're dealing with people that may be less resilient in the aftermath of an emergency. You may have more health-related issues or health dependencies. On the direct fatality side, excuse me. On the direct fatality side, older adults may have issues with evacuation and other storm preparation. They may not be able to get themselves ready for the event and can be more vulnerable in that state as well. And if you look at the gender breakdown, and this is consistent with fatalities across the country, the vast majority are male, 60 to 70% across the direct and indirect fatality causes. Sorry, was there a question? Okay, I'll keep going. I couldn't quite hear, but I'll keep going unless somebody has something. Tropical cyclone tracks, I just wanted to look at the storms that have been close to or passed within about 65 or 70 miles of Dare County during this 11-year period. And that's what you see on the map there. There have been 2 hurricane landfalls in Dare County during this time. We had Arthur back in 2014 that made landfall as it was actually coming back out north of Oregon Inlet. It made landfall farther south, initially in Carteret County. And Dorian made landfall as a Category 2 storm right at Cape Hatteras in 2019. But again, just a reminder that even without direct hurricane landfalls, there can be significant impacts to the Outer Banks. And we'll talk a little bit more about that from the storm surge perspective in a minute. In terms of the Atlantic hurricane seasonal outlook, NOAA's forecast is for an above normal season, forecasting a 60% chance of above normal activity. We're forecasting a range of 13 to 19 named storms, 6 to 10 of those becoming hurricanes, 3 to 5 of those being major hurricanes. But at this point, I wouldn't pay any attention to the seasonal forecast. I live in a hurricane-prone area. I'm only worried about what kind of storms there are going to be, and my preparation is going to be the same no matter what this seasonal forecast says or how the season plays out up to a given point. We are expecting generally favorable conditions across the Atlantic Basin, especially in this main development region, across the tropical Atlantic from the west coast of Africa across into the Caribbean. This is the area where we tend to get the vast majority of major hurricanes that form. And the conditions across this part of the basin between August, September, and October, those sort of peak months of hurricane season, are what really determine the overall activity of the season as a whole. And we're expecting warmer than normal sea surface temperatures, lower than normal vertical wind shear or change of wind speed and direction with height. And without El Nino present, which typically impedes hurricane development in the Atlantic, these otherwise pretty favorable conditions should result in above normal activity across the basin this season. But what really matters, of course, is where you get affected, or do you get affected by a storm that affects you and your community. So far we've had 3 tropical cyclones in the Atlantic. We had Chantal just make landfall in northeastern South Carolina right around the 4th of July. Brought significant impacts in terms of rainfall. In central North Carolina, we saw about 6 fatalities from the rainfall so far in Chantal, and we also had Andrea and Barry. The next storm that forms in the Atlantic will be Dexter. And here's where we are sort of on the overall Atlantic hurricane seasonal trend activity chart. So we got a long way to go. That's the message of this chart is here we are at the white arrow in mid-July. You can see the activity levels in terms of how many active storms you tend to have on a day per 100 years is still pretty low here. It only is marginally higher than it would be in June. But you see by the time we get to about 3 to 4 weeks from now, as we get into early and in mid-August, the activity levels increase significantly and very quickly up to that peak of hurricane season that occurs around September 10th or so. And then activity tends to fall off rather steadily, but hangs on a little bit longer as we get into October before things really tend to quiet down in November and as we end the season at the end of November and get into December. In terms of what a season typically looks like, in terms of where storms occur across the basin, now that we're in July, we tend to get storms forming in the Gulf, near and east of Florida, and then off the United States East Coast. And we start to see some formation down here now in the deeper tropics in the east of the Lesser Antilles and into portions of the Caribbean. As we get into August and September, the activity, the areas favorable for activity really spread out across the entire Atlantic basin, all the way from the west coast of Africa, across the Caribbean into the Gulf, off the US East Coast. In August and September really looks like August, but just with more storms as the ocean waters continue to warm up and the atmosphere is kind of at its most favorable across a very wide area for storms to form. And there you see some of those typical long track storms. Thinking back to a storm like Fran from 1996 or Floyd from 1999, one of these deep tropical hurricanes that then curves up along the US East Coast. Others go into the Gulf or the Caribbean. And then we also deal, as we get later into the season, primarily the window for development shifts back to the west, and we tend to focus more on systems that form a lot closer to home. In the northwestern Caribbean near Florida, these are systems that can form and then make landfall within a very short period of time. If you think back to a storm like Helene from last year, they're not all going to be these long track hurricanes that we follow for more than a week. Sometimes they can develop and make landfall very quickly. And then by the time we get into November, the area of development and the number of storms starts to decrease pretty dramatically, but we still can tend to see formation here in the southwestern Atlantic and in portions of the western Caribbean. So in terms of what we're doing at the Hurricane Center, I wanted to show you sort of how we've made progress in our forecasting over the last 50 years to 60 years. So what you're looking at on the left is our average track forecast error. So we're forecasting out to 5 days where the center of the storm is going to be. We've been making forecasts for hurricane track going all the way back to the 1950s. And what you're looking at here is each colored line represents sort of the average track forecast error by decade. And you can see that if you go from the 1960s, 70s, 80s, and then especially into the 90s and the last 20 to 30 years, we've made significant progress in forecasting hurricane track. So now if you go out to 3 days, our average track error is about 70 or 80 miles. If you go back to the 1990s, that average error was close to 250 miles. So we've really been able to really hone in on track forecasts on average, are much more accurate than they used to be. Out at day 5 now, for example, some of our errors are below 200 miles, and they used to be. We only started making 5-day forecasts a little more than 20 years ago, and back then the errors were closer to 300 miles. But the real story, I think, of the last 10 to 15 years has been on the right side, and that's the intensity forecast and how much better they've gotten. If you look at these colored lines, forecasting how strong hurricanes can be was a pretty futile effort from the 1970s all the way up into the first decade of this century. We really did not make much progress in our ability to forecast how strong storms would be. But if you look at the lines and the colors between the 2000s and the 2010s and now into this decade, we've made tremendous progress in our ability to forecast intensity. If you look out 3 days, our average error is now about 10 miles per hour, whereas 20 years ago, it was about closer to 20 miles per hour. So we really cut those errors in about half during that time frame. And that's really key to being able to get the hazards right, because intensity is tied to things like storm surge, obviously wind, and the combination of improving the track and the intensity forecast and starting to get a handle on the size of the storm as well has really enabled us to issue more accurate and timely watches and warnings for hazards like storm surge and like wind. And I know everybody likes to look at model forecasts and spaghetti plots, and you see a lot of model forecasts show up on social media, but the one message I want you to take away from is that the Hurricane Center's forecast is more consistent and more accurate than any individual model that we use as forecast guidance. You look here, this chart is showing you track error on the y-axis and the consistency of the forecast, like how much it changes from one forecast to the next on the x-axis. And what you want to be down here in this lower left corner where this is the NHC forecast. It's more accurate and it shows less change from one forecast to the next than any individual model does. And that's one of the big roles of the human forecaster here is we have a forecaster sitting down looking at all that model guidance, interrogating it, understanding it, also looking at the forecast we just put out 6 hours before, and then making those really smart adjustments that are more accurate, but also maintaining that consistency from one forecast to the next. And on the intensity side, just an example from last year is Helene went from a 35-mile-per-hour disturbance, which wasn't even a tropical depression, to a Category 4 hurricane in 84 hours, 3.5 days. Rapid intensification, and we were able to start to forecast some of that rapid strengthening. And in fact, Helene marked the first time that the Hurricane Center that we had ever issued a forecast for a system that wasn't yet a tropical depression or tropical storm to become a major hurricane within that time frame. And that's really important to getting those initial forecasts right, setting the stage for what those potential hazards could be, not just in the landfall area in Florida, but downstream into the southeastern United States, into the Carolinas and Georgia, for what sort of impacts they could be seeing within just 3 to 4 days. And another way to look at this is how are our forecasts in terms of our forecast error when rapid intensification happens. So rapid intensification is an increase of the peak winds of a hurricane by at least 35 miles per hour within a 24-hour period. And right now we make, when that happens, our day one error is about 18 miles per hour. So not a great forecast, but the errors about 10 years ago were 30 miles per hour. So we've cut the errors by about 40%. And we are actually making a lot more aggressive forecasts of hurricane intensity than we ever had made before. 5 or 10 years ago, we would have never made the forecasts that we made for Helene's intensification or several other storms that we're now able to make in this current environment. So as we get into hazards and talking about the impacts of the storm, I think it's just a reminder that the focus really needs to be on those individual hazards, not the track of the center, not the category of the storm, but really on what are the risks, especially in the Outer Banks or places that are so sensitive to storm surge and coastal flooding, the wind impacts, the rainfall flooding. And we have watches and warnings and a lot of information to provide about all those hazards, not just from the Hurricane Center, but from our partners elsewhere within the National Weather Service. And just looking at the storm surge risk across eastern North Carolina, and particularly the Outer Banks, we have one of your storm surge poles in front of our building here. That's the sign, the picture I took on the left. It's right next to that big pole that's 9 feet high that you guys have out there in Dare County. And we actually have one of your signs here. And just a symbol of the partnership that we have with you and how important storm surge is to driving evacuation decisions and the creation of evacuation zones in North Carolina and around the country. And it's important to remember that in the Outer Banks, the storm surge threats can come from Atlantic landfalling systems or systems on the Atlantic side, but also Gulf landfall. So if you look at these two maps, these are showing the extent of the storm surge watch and warning for 2 different storms. And the numbers represent the observations of roughly inundation above ground level. So on the left, we've got a big area covered by a storm surge warning all the way from the Myrtle Beach area, much of the North Carolina coast, Pamlico, Albemarle Sounds, the Outer Banks. And on the right, we have a storm surge watch in effect for an area covering much of the Outer Banks and Dare County at least. And you can see the inundation there, 2 to 3 feet in some spots here in Dare County, over here 2 to 4 feet. So what storms were these? Well, if you look at Oregon Inlet, the storm on the right, this is the water trace there. The green line is showing you roughly inundation above the mean high tide line. Again, 1 to 2 feet over several high tide cycles over the course of about 2.5 or 3 days. And then here is the other event with the inundation reaching about 4 feet above ground level at the same tide station, but occurring in one very pronounced peak and pronounced storm surge in one particular high tide cycle. So the storms here were Florence and Michael. So we had Florence that made landfall and moved very slowly along the coast of North Carolina, ultimately making landfall farther south in the Outer Banks, produced sort of a prolonged storm surge with some inundation. The biggest inundation was actually up in the Neuse River, up in the New Bern area. But then you had Michael that actually made landfall on the Gulf Coast and had an inland track up through the southeastern United States, and you got the sound side flooding from the westerly flow on the other side, on the back side of the system as it exited off to the north, actually produced more significant inundation. So just a reminder that you can have those types of inundation events both from the Atlantic side and on the Sound side flooding as well. Here's just another example from Matthew in 2016. The observed water level at Coast Guard Station Hatteras, a storm paralleling the coast, produced inundation of 5 to 6 feet above ground level there. And then you had Arthur in 2014 that made landfall, again, down in Carteret County, moved across the Pamlico Sound and then exited back out over the Outer Banks, produced 3.5 feet of inundation or so up at Oregon Inlet. So again, it doesn't take a direct track coming to you from the Atlantic side, from the east or southeast, to create significant inundation and result in that need for preparations and even potentially evacuations for storm surge. So some of the products and services we have and updates here at the Hurricane Center, I'll go through them individually here quickly. We still have our experimental cone graphic, which shows you the likely track of the center of the storm. And last year we rolled out a version of the cone graphic that started to show the inland extent of the hurricane and tropical storm watches and warnings in the United States to better highlight the risk of not just the coastal wind impacts, but the inland ones. And this is an example of this graphic from Helene, where you can see the greater part of multiple states under tropical storm or hurricane wind watches and warnings from Florida all the way up to North Carolina. This graphic will continue to be experimental and available throughout this upcoming hurricane season. Another concept that we're going to make a little change to is what we call potential tropical cyclones. These are systems that are not yet a tropical depression or a tropical storm, but could bring hazard to land areas within about 2 to 3 days. And we started using this concept about 8 years ago, because before that, we could only write advisories or forecasts and issue watches and warnings for systems once they had become a tropical depression or tropical storm. So like if we had a system like Helene, we would have had to wait until it had become a depression or storm to get forecast information out, watches and warnings. So in 2017, we started issuing products for these systems before they even became tropical cyclones. And we found it so useful. We used it 9 times last year, and it's been giving us the ability to add about an extra day of lead time to watches and warnings. Beginning this year, we'll now be able to issue these forecasts and this information out there for high confidence, high impact events within about 72 hours of the impacts reaching land areas. So it'll again provide some additional lead time. We don't have a lot of storms, especially high-end storms form, say right off the coast of North Carolina. But again, for storms forming farther south, say in the Bahamas or in the Gulf or the Caribbean, that could reach North Carolina within just 3 or 4 days, this concept and this new product and service change will give you some additional lead time for forecast information for those hazards. Another thing we're rolling out this year is a US rip current risk viewer. As I talked about, rip currents have been one of the leading causes of fatalities in the United States from tropical cyclones, resulting in about 10% of the deaths. A lot of these deaths occur from hurricanes that are well offshore, especially in Florida, North Carolina, and New Jersey with East Coast facing beaches. So what we're going to do in 2025 is we have a new rip current viewer that allows users to get sort of a big national to regional picture of the rip current risk across the United States, using the information that's provided by local National Weather Service offices around the country. So that information is not new. The folks in Morehead City provided, Wilmington, but putting it all in one place where everybody can look at it at sort of a high level to raise the awareness of that threat is something we're experimenting with this season on hurricanes.gov. Another thing we're working on is post-storm heat risk. We talked about how heat-related fatalities have been a big cause of indirect or post-storm deaths in recent years. So we're working with our partners at the Weather Prediction Center to try to highlight areas that are at risk of post-storm heat after a significant hurricane event where there could be widespread power outages. So we're going to look for areas where the Weather Service's heat risk mapping that really looks at the potential for dangerous heat overlays with areas that could see those significant wind impacts. And we're going to start messaging that risk for post-storm heat before the storm even makes landfall so that people can start to prepare, may need to evacuate, may need to take other precautions to make sure they can stay out of the heat after the storm occurs. So that's all I've got. Thank you for the time and the attention and for coming out today. And I'll turn it back over to Eric and Drew.
All right, Mike, we really appreciate it. What we're going to do now is, if you can hang tight for just a couple of minutes, we're going to take questions from the audience, and then you're welcome to stay. We'll let you go if you need to.
Yep, absolutely.
So just hang tight. So if we have a question from the audience while I take care of this presentation, just raise your hand. I will call on you. For the virtual component, I'm going to reread your question so that I can hear on the recording, everybody can hear. So let me switch this over to us.
What services are available?
Okay, so Mike, we've got your full screen, so we got your camera. I'll take any questions from the audience and then we will. Okay, what was your question, sir?
What services?
So the question, Mike, and I can help with this if you need it. The question from the audience are, what services are available after the storm?
So after the storm, yeah, that's a great question. So in terms of the Hurricane Center, we try to continue to provide as much messaging and information as we can after the storm in terms of risk related to things like post-storm heat. But really, since we're following the storm itself, as the storm moves past an area and onto the next area, we're really more messaging those direct impacts. And so I think the post-storm safety messaging is going to mostly come from your local emergency and government officials, your local National Weather Service office that are going to be focused on, post-storm, heat advisories, or you're going to have folks like Drew telling you when it's safe to come back into an area when evacuation orders have been lifted, and your local officials will give you that information to keep yourself safe after the storm. I think that's what you were asking from what I could hear.
Perfect. Thumbs up, Mike. Thumbs up.
Thanks, Mike.
Great.
Any others from the audience? Yes.
Will we have to be concerned about forecast accuracy continuing to improve if there is any impact on our staffing going forward?
I think the question was about staffing and potential changes to forecast accuracy. So we're fully operational here at the Hurricane Center this year. The point I'll make about improvements is that sustained investment in research and development over many years and decades has really led to the forecast improvements that we've seen in terms of storm surge, in terms of improving intensity forecast of hurricanes, track forecasts. And if we're going to continue to see improvements, we do need that continued investment in research and development, because it takes years sometimes to get tools from the research community into things that we can use at the Hurricane Center that then carry down into improved forecasts and warnings.
Does that make sense? She's shaking her head. I can follow. Drew's itching to answer. I'll let him follow up. What I'm saying is, we've had challenges for many years, but you will never find more dedicated people than in weather service. So we've got through all those challenges. But what's hard to get over is what Mike said: research. Those improvements he's shown through the years has been because of many people behind the scenes. So that's going to be a challenge. I'm not sure. Yeah. So Drew, I do want to say.
I was really going to end there, but $4. That's the National Weather Service. $4 for each one of us. Just continue to support the National Weather Service in any conversations you have locally with the elected officials around the world. We really want to focus on getting information about the storms now, but what's going to happen in the future. We didn't bring it all together. We wanted to bring it together today, and what the Hurricane Center can provide, what we can provide. So with that, I've got a question over here.
I have a friend who grew up on Market Lane, Southwest Florida, and she maintains that storm surge, which has caused a lot of damage there recently, is a relatively recent occurrence. Is there any truth to that belief?
Eric, I might need you to repeat that a little closer to the microphone. I heard it was related to storm surge, but I didn't hear the details.
The general business, he's got a friend down in Long Island that insists that storm surge is more of a recent phenomenon, has been for a long time.
Yeah, storm surge is episodically responsible, again, going back many years for hundreds, if not thousands of fatalities and hurricanes on a single day. You go back to the Galveston hurricane of 1900, where there were 5,000 to 6,000 fatalities, largely due to storm surge. It's not the biggest killer in every event, but every once in a while there is a sort of the perfect combination of ingredients comes together. You can go back to Ian in Florida, Southwest Florida in 2022. That was responsible for about 40 fatalities. Katrina was responsible, storm surge, for hundreds of fatalities. And that's you go back to Camille in 1969 was sort of the poster child for storm surge along the Gulf Coast, again with hundreds of deaths. So it's not every event, and a lot of the improvements that you've seen in the development of storm surge evacuation zones and a specific warning for that storm surge hazard has really been what's driven that storm surge mortality down over 30 to 40, going all the way back to Camille, 50 to 60 years of investment to modeling storm surge risk, working with emergency managers like Drew to develop those storm surge evacuation zones to get people out, and understanding what that storm surge risk is and communicating that risk. So storm surge, if you go back to before 2013, was responsible for about half of the direct fatalities in tropical storms and hurricanes, and now it's responsible for about 10%. But that risk is absolutely there for every big event. And it doesn't take a major hurricane, especially in places along the Gulf Coast, to cause life-threatening storm surge inundation. Or even if you look at a storm like Florence along the North Carolina coast, a slow-moving, not as powerful hurricane, but large and slow-moving, can move a lot of water around. So it's not a one-size-fits-all approach to getting big storm surge in a particular location, but it absolutely has been for going back, as long as there have been tropical storms and hurricanes, it's probably the biggest individual hazard risk from those storms along the coast.
Thanks, Mike. Yes. You in the back. Yes.
What is the biggest difference between the spaghetti models? Is it, like, for instance, the Euro versus the US? What is it, input that makes them different? I mean, why are there such variances?
Yeah, it's a great question. So spaghetti models, and when you look at the spaghetti model charts, every one of those lines kind of looks the same, but they're all different levels of sophistication in terms of the models that go into making those forecasts. So you asked about the difference between the European model, the ECMWF, and the National Weather Service's GFS model. So the main differences are due to two things. They use slightly different input or analysis to sort of understand what's going on in the atmosphere at the initial time. And then they use slightly different ways to represent processes in the atmosphere that affect things like temperature and moisture and wind and pressure. And the small differences in the analysis or in how you move the forecast forward can result in big differences when you get out to 3, 4, 5, 10 days into the future. But generally, we don't follow any one particular model here on its own. There's no model that's the best for every storm. Some storms, the European model's great. Other storms, the GFS model's better. But what's really best is the combination of the best 5 or 6 models when we blend them together and then use the human forecaster here is really looking at that. So that was the point I was trying to make on that one chart, where it's like, don't worry about the models, that's our job. And don't worry about trying to focus on one model forecast trend from one cycle to the next. It's really that combination of the best models that provides the most consistent and accurate forecast over and over again.
What are the changes in the ocean currents on the eastern coast of the United States are you seeing in the long-term trends, and what impact might that have on the storms?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a little outside of our purview, focusing on sort of the long-term trends. I mean, I think certainly we've seen warming ocean temperatures. That's probably the thing we can speak to the most. Warming ocean temperatures can support storms that can intensify more quickly and can expand the area where storms could intensify or make it, they can get farther north before they could weaken. The other thing we're seeing is rising sea level gradually with time. And that's increasing the risk of storm surge in most locations because you're starting from a higher level of water before you ever have a hurricane on top of it. But certainly, ocean currents themselves are they're not steering the hurricane, but how they move warm and cool pools of ocean water around can certainly affect the storm's intensity and where storms can form. So.
All right, Mike, I do not see any more hands raised. Really appreciate you joining us. You're welcome to stay. Drew and I are part of the talk. I'll send you the link afterwards so you can kind of see how the time to get it. But we really appreciate your time. We know how busy you are, especially getting into the midst of hurricane season. So thank you for taking the time to speak with us.
Thanks so much.
Please do our best for all those North Carolinians down there, Virginia, Rome. This is the deputy director of North Carolina. There's so much ties to North Carolina. There's hurricanes here. But thanks again, man.
No, he's there. He just muted it. All right. So now you are stuck with me. Let me get this over here. There's a great opportunity to hear from an expert in the Hurricane Center. We are going to shift gears, highlight a few things that Mike talked about, and then focus on the local level. So my name is Eric Hayden. I am a meteorologist. It's a warning coordination meteorologist, fancy term for liaison between you and the local weather service office. So we work with Mike down at the Hurricane Center, and then we work with our local resources like Drew to make you safe. A lot of key points that he emphasized already, we're going to re-emphasize. A few new ones: continue to trust official sources. We're going to give you some examples of that. Water spill kills, Mike mentioned that. Never, ever focus on just the category of the storm. Impacts occur well away from the center, and water is what kills, and Mike showed that with some of his information. He showed you those graphics. We're improving. We continue to improve. We're going to get it wrong sometimes. There's going to be some nuances we don't get right. The problem is communication, miscommunication, or people not focusing on the right information. There's plenty of information out there. Things like this, here it comes, this is crazy, oh wow, these are all things I can easily pull from YouTube. If somebody's saying that with every single storm, you're needlessly getting worried about things you don't need to worry about. Instead, I want you to focus on these two resources. If you get anything out of today's talk, focus on official sources of information. Pat asked about the different models. Mike showed you that this is the most accurate forecast. I'm going to re-emphasize that with the map. Hurricanes.gov, weather.gov. It's all you need to pay attention to. Our local news media does a good job. You can focus on them. They usually use a lot of our same resources, but cutting just to the chase, hurricanes.gov and weather.gov. And I'm not up here just to tell you that because I should. I don't want you to worry about things you don't need to worry about. We will let you know when to worry and what to focus on. So please just focus on those two resources. I get paid the same today to drive up to this beautiful pier and give this awesome talk as I do when we have a hurricane or it's a sunny day. It doesn't benefit me to have storms. So we're going to give to you straight what you need to pay attention to. Of course, I need to say that, right? With the weather service, I got to say we're the best and we have great information. This is a message put out by the local office, Greenville, Spartanburg, South Carolina, prior to Helene. It's hard to see this monitor, but I'm highlighting a few points. This is an incredibly dangerous situation. This is the Wednesday before the storm. Potential to be a once-in-a-lifetime event. Consider temporarily relocating to another location if you live near certain rivers. So the information now is out there. Sometimes there's a human element. It's hard to believe if you've never been through a storm and you live in the mountains that you could be flooded like that. And that's a human element. But the information is out there. You don't need to go searching for it. Hurricanes.gov, weather.gov, it is there. I really want to emphasize this point. Mike touched on this a little bit. 3 days before Helene made landfall, it was not a storm. Let that sink in. 3 days before Helene made landfall wasn't a storm. And the Hurricane Center predicted on the left that stands for major category storm hitting the Panhandle of Florida, and the image on the right is the settling loop of the eye making landfall. So why are we still having issues? Some of it is, again, that misinformation, not paying attention to trusted sources. So, again, Aaron, you've got to say that. Why would you come here and say that something else is better? So I always like backing things up with facts. We have tons of facts in the weather service. Who was around for Hurricane Gloria in 1985? So don't be shy. So 1985, all right. Hurricane Dorian, if Drew and I were working back in the mid-80s, I won't say I was just 6, but back in the mid-80s, and we were going to say Hurricane Dorian 3 days out was going to make landfall in the Outer Banks, I would be able to tell him somewhere between Savannah and Washington, D.C. That's the storm 3 days out. And we all know a hurricane's not just an eye, it's hundreds of miles across, right? But just let's focus on the eye for a second. Drew is going to hit somewhere between Savannah and Washington 3 days out. But still, that's a long time ago. Who remembers Floyd in '99? Was here in '99. Sophomore in the community college, but we won't talk about that. So 1999, Drew and I are still working. I was telling Mr. Drew, the eye Floyd 3 days out could get anywhere from Charleston, South Carolina to Richmond. Better. That's pretty good improvement from the mid-80s to the late 90s. Charleston to Richmond, he could probably work with that. Last year, I would tell Drew, 3 days before Helene made landfall, the center was going to go between Greenville and Wilmington. Greenville and Wilmington. So the accuracy is not the issue. Again, we're still going to make stumbles along the way. We are predicting Mother Nature. Please, for those that are not here and talk about all the things that are out on social media, just shift them to things I'm about to show you. Because we have the most accurate forecasts. Let's talk about this. Why do people misunderstand it? Some of it's our own fault. The forecast continues to get skinnier and skinnier each year. And that's because it's based on statistical error. So each year it's recalculated. It's not drawn based on the storm. It's not going to be narrow for a small storm and wide for a big storm. It's only based on our error. So that cone is incredibly skinny because it only shows where the center of the storm is most likely to go. So what they've done to improve that, instead of showing the cone, he mentioned these watches and warnings. We try to superimpose other information on that. We're going to reemphasize that here in a second with the forecast cone. It's not an in or out thing. If you're anywhere near it, you should pay attention. That just is where we think the center will go. Impacts occur hundreds and hundreds of miles away from that center. So that's a challenge. There's a lot of focus on that dot. This is Floyd in '99. Look at where the dot is, and look at our coastline. We're getting rain, we're getting rain, we're getting rain, we're getting wind, we're getting wind, we're getting wind, we're getting rain, and lo and behold, here comes the center. A storm is hours and days long. Everybody focuses on that dot. Where's the center going to make landfall? When they really should look at the whole storm. If it's anywhere near you, just because it hits Florida, or just because it's off our coast, like with Matthew, we had some of the highest surge in Hatteras Village from a storm that was just off our coast. Anywhere near you, you should be paying attention, not just where that dot is. So I've convinced you that we have the best stuff. Where can you get it? You can click on Eastern North Carolina. You can add /report. You're really fancy with your phones, and if you need any help, my 2 sons are here today. They're up front, so they can help you with that squiggly little thing in the upper corner, that QR code. So you can scan that QR code, but we even have a catchphrase. If it's weather you love, weather.gov. So in all honesty, please pay attention. We got a lot of resources at the local level. Social media is another good resource. It can be a megaphone for a lot of stuff. Right? It can also be a megaphone for good information. You have the power on your Instagram and Facebook or X, whatever you are or not on, to share that information. If you share our stuff, more people are going to see it. The algorithm's going to work better, and then more people see it. So NWS Morehead City, we do videos, a whole bunch of information, briefings to Drew, we record it. This hurricane form, we record it. It's on YouTube. So we're extremely active on social media. NWS for National Weather Service, Morehead City. A great way to kind of cut to the chase of what's going on. One of the things we advertise on social media is this briefing. This is the same briefing Drew gets. There's no special information. You're getting the same resources that the people making decisions in your community see. Resources like what's the impact of flooding? What day or time period is most likely to be impacted? So right in 3 seconds, we try to make graphics that you can just look at it without a meteorology and understand what's going to happen. So when I'm about to tell you not to focus on just the category, focus on the impacts, this is what I'm talking about. What's in this briefing? What's Drew pushing out from the county? It's all going to be there. You just have to decide what kind of decision you're going to make. That's on our website too. Like this gentleman just took a picture of, you can get the QR code. If you're familiar with our website, we're going to highlight it at the top. It's going to be lit up and flashing and all kinds of things so you can see it. Want to take one step back. We're in hurricane season. One thing you should be doing every day, or maybe every other day, is paying attention to this. This is a tropical weather outlook. It's issued 4 times a day, goes out to 7 days. Your local favorite meteorologist shows this, or you can get it from the Hurricane Center website. It just shows a low, medium, or high chance for something happening in the next 7 days. Nothing you need to fret over. You don't need to look at it 4 times a day. You might want to when it gets closer. That tends to happen. But wake up in the morning, check it. Do I need to, finalize my kit? Do I really need to, finish that hurricane kit? Otherwise, move on with your day and wait until the next day when we may have storms. So please pay attention to those resources. I'm going to just briefly touch on a couple of resources the Hurricane Center provides. These are on our website. These are on our briefings. It's hurricanes.gov. One is the arrival time of wind. They tell you when it's most likely to get here, or in a worst case, hey, when should I leave, or when should I finish my preparation? Worst case, early reasonable. And then arrival is when we actually think it's going to get here. And then storm surge, Drew, we're going to talk a little bit about this poll behind me, but we will give you values for how high the water could get in a worst case scenario. All that information is on the Hurricane Center site. It's on our site, and the county will push it out as well. Mike showed this hurricane season. I think a lot of you knew it was the peak of middle September. But what you may not know is all those names were a long season. So when the kids go back to school, it's after Labor Day. Who likes football? Who's ready for NFL football season? Or maybe you're going to watch an all-star game tonight. September 10th is halftime. September 10th is halftime. We have a long season to get through. We've had storms into October and November. So just remember, it's a long season. You should be prepared. So hopefully we haven't lived through all of these storms, certainly not the ones at the top. We are trying to change up our outreach talks. And Drew's helped with this. He provided us with some files that Dare County has kept through the years. So you'll see some historical documents in this talk to show you, not to scare you, but if you're a new resident, we live in a beautiful place. I mean, I tell my boys, this is my favorite talk to do. Who gets to do a talk on the second floor, Jeanette's here, and look out the back? That was worth all the calculus I had to get through to do that. But it's our responsibility to be prepared for this. This happens sometimes. It's a way of life. It could be next year, it could be 15 years from now, but it's going to happen again. So we just try to prepare you for that, and then you move on with your day until that day comes. And one way you do that is being prepared. Drew's going to touch on a little bit from a local perspective. I want you to bookmark this website. Weather.gov, our website /WarheadCity/hurricane-prep, scan the QR code, however you want to do that. There is a ton of information on this website. I'm a little biased because I made this, so I continue to add more resources, evacuations, what to have in your kit. The key is planning now. We're not stressed right now. There's no storms on the horizon. You can go to Walmart or any of your big box stores. There's plenty of water to get. Think about times in your life when you've made decisions. When you've had a lot of time to think about it, plan out, you're making pretty good decisions. When you had to be reactionary and quick and you're under stress, maybe not. So if you make those plans now, you're going to make good decisions before the storm gets here. It's a 3-step process. Before you make that kit, before you ask Drew, where do I evacuate? How do I evacuate? It starts with you. What is your risk? And a lot of people jump to the weather, and that's important. Do you live in a low-lying area? Are you beachfront? Are you in an area that has flooded? Are you in downtown area where it floods with heavy rains? What's your vulnerability? But it's also who's in your house. Do you have 2 teenage boys, a teenage girl, a wife, and then your mom lives 15 minutes away in Swansboro? A lot to think of when you're talking about evacuations. Do you have pets? Do you have elderly parents? Are they on oxygen? That is what you want to think about. That's who you're preparing for when you're making that kit or evacuate. So step 2, now that you've thought about everybody in your home, babies, pets, elderly parents, whoever, then you prepare your kit. Bare minimum is 3 days. I hesitate to even say that anymore. That is just bottom floor. You gotta have it. Pushing to at least a week. Food, water, medicine, anything you would need to be on your own. And you just think about anything, contact lenses, prescriptions. We're in such a society now, Drew, you want something, you order on Amazon, it's here in a day or 2, right? You can just go to the store, you can get whatever you want. It's not like that during the storm. You may not be able to get to places. So please plan ahead. Supplies will run out. Once you've got this plan in place, then you can sit back. If we get a storm, you're ready to go. I do understand that not everybody can get this done this weekend. It's financially or just logistically. Start with water. Get your bottled water this weekend. Think about anything, if you break into steps, the weeding in your garden, the lawn mowing, you've got to get to, and it's overwhelming. You just break it into steps, it will happen. So this week, get your bottled water. Then wait a week or 2, then get your canned goods, break it into parts to spread out the financial impact and ensure that you actually get it done. And last but not least, always have a plan to evacuate. I hear time and time again, I've been here for every storm, or I'm not going to leave unless it's a 3 or 4. I have a plan. For Drew and myself and your family, at least have that thought in the back of your head. I'll steal one of his lines and other lines I've heard from emergency managers. There are some in the state, but that is the last resort. It's not a hotel. Raise your hand if you have family that comes to visit you at the beach here. Right? I see some of those hands begrudgingly gone up. They're coming last weekend. I know, I've got 3 parts of my family visiting in August. That's why I don't get storm. So all of those people that visit you, go plan A in your plan. Much more comfortable than a shelter. Have a couple ways. So before I grew up in Maryland, plan A for me was Baltimore, Maryland. Plan B was, we've got relatives, Greenville and Columbia, South Carolina. Well, my family lives near me now. So plan A is gone. So our family plan is always to go opposite of the storm. Maybe it's Richmond, maybe it's Raleigh, maybe it's the mountains or Helene. It would have been those folks coming down here. You have to be flexible. Don't just say you're going to go to Williamston or Greenville or just Virginia Beach. It just depends where the storm is. So please have that plan in the back of your mind. So as we close, we're going to focus on impacts and we're not going to focus on what's behind it. This is a Saffir-Simpson scale. It is important. It is a wind scale. What does that mean there? It's only based on wind. It doesn't have anything to do with how much rain you're going to have, how long the storm is going to sit over you, whether you have to put a rain boots, whether you're on the right side of the storm, left side of the storm, big storm, small storm. I'm not saying to ignore it. If Florence was a 4 and it hit down our way, and I live 3 miles from the ocean, I was worried. But it is only related to wind. Don't make all your decisions just based on this. Instead, focus on the impacts. And we're going to start with water. Just like Mike said, even though we are seeing more wind-related deaths in past history, water still leads the way. Majority of those deaths occur in vehicles. This could be storm surge, it could be rip currents, it could be flooding. Water is extremely powerful. As you can see some of the images from our county, cutting off communities for weeks and months, limiting access, very strong. It can carry your car away or isolate you. So water is what we focus on locally. So we'll end with that. Water, wind, and tornadoes, all of the impacts, and then we're going to turn it over to Mr. Drew for some perspective from the county. So storm surge is still our most, that was a good word. That's pretty neat. So where we stand, storm surge is still our highest vulnerability. Wind is up there with all the water around us, and not just to your life, but to your way of life. So if you're in Hatteras Island being cut off, or you're in Manio, or even in the northern Outer Banks off Albemarle Sound, it's surge. So storm surge is it. Does not have to make a landfall in our area to cause extensive damage. Florence is an example of Michael made landfall down in the Gulf, and we had 2 to 4 feet of surge on the backside of the sound. So storm surge is it, and we do not take into account the wind action on top of that surge. So we can get things like this for Highway 12 and creating new inlets in our community. So we've seen it before. Hopefully we won't see it again. I showed all communities this. This is a reasonable worst case scenario. This is not some outlandish storm. The last category 3 we had in the state was Brandon in 96. So I'll just say we're due. We're due for a storm of that magnitude. So these values, 3, 6, 9 feet of storm surge. We had 2 to 4 with Michael. We've had 4 to 7 on Hatteras Island. Director Brennan mentioned those values. He said 15 feet, 15 to 20 feet with the storm last year at Helene. What does that mean? So Drew and the county have installed poles similar like these. Raise your hand if you've seen something like this. Did you know what it was? All right, good. If you did, now you will. This is our homemade version. This is not a standard Drew's or permanent, but this is our traveling storm surge pole. And this is to show you the perspective of water. So when we issue storm surge watches and warnings, it's for 3 feet of water above normally dry ground. What does that mean? Those are low-lying areas by the water we inundated that aren't usually inundated with 3 feet. That's typically about 6 feet tall. I like to think it's 5'10". But 6 feet tall, that's pretty high. 6 feet is up to me. So when my director Brendan throws out numbers, 3, 6, 9 feet, 15 feet to the top, we can easily in our community see 6 to 9. Easy. That's not some thing. On this map, you see there's some red areas, probably different tidal areas. Still, 6 to 9 in our area is very, very easy to ascertain with the Cat 3. If you're new to the area, you may think storm surge is just, on the ocean front. It's not. On the backside of the sound, we can have some higher values. Pamlico Sound is great for seafood, very, very shallow. It can slosh back and forth. It can blow out to the west and then come back. Manio, Kitty Hawk, Nags at the backside of the sound, we can get flooding as well. So just some examples of the storm surge in our community, and just a visual. When we say 3, 6, 9 feet, that might not seem a lot. Remember that pole just behind me to kind of hit home. We can't get flooding. It's hard to get flash flooding here in terms of flowing water. Most of our flowing water would be storm surge, but at the end of the day, water is water. So if you have deep water, it's dangerous. If it's moving, it can be extremely powerful. We will issue flood warnings, flash flood warnings for that. 2 feet of water, usually, you just don't want to be driving through anything like that. And again, the point of emphasis, the category storm has nothing to do with it. Chantal was a tropical storm downgrading into a depression that went through Raleigh. You saw all the flooding they had a couple weeks ago. You all didn't have Florence down this way, but it was just the one, and we had 20 to 30 inches of rain down where we live. So category is not related to that. If you do head inland to evacuate, don't be in a rush back. Water takes a long time to drain from the mountains down to the ocean. And a lot of times we'll encounter roads like this. You've certainly seen it in the news with all the flooding we've had. So you probably understand that flash flooding is strong and powerful. Every news clip you see, people drive through it. But what they don't realize is that the road may not exist underneath it. So it's not just how deep is the water, does the road even exist? And the other thing I want you to keep in mind, this is in an area towards snow limit, but this is what Highway 12 would look like with storm surge or flooding. So when you decide to stay, we don't tell you to stay or to go. But just think about it's going to be a while to get back to normal to the velocity of the storm. So Highway 12 might be like that. It may take a while to get resources in, especially farther to the south. So our campaign with that is always turn around, don't drown. Rip currents, Director Brennan mentioned this. How many of you remember Hurricane Dorian, 2019? So you remember Dorian, wasn't as bad this far, but Chicago has some pretty good storm surge and certainly overcoat. So I saw a bunch of hands for Dorian. 2019, you got a good memory, 6 years, I can't remember. How many of you remember Lorenzo? Without seeing the name on the slide, who remembers Lorenzo? I don't see any slide, any hands. We lost 4 people and beaches in North Carolina due to Lorenzo. Category 5 storm, 2,000 miles away, but the swell reached our coast. And 8 lives up and down the East Coast. So rip currents are a serious deal with any tropical system, whether they make landfall or not. Think about it, if you're paying to be at the beach, the storm is Saturday, you're going to be out there Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Keep in mind, those waves get ahead of the storm by many days. So the red flags are flying, should not be in the ocean. Drew, I'm sure is going to talk about love the beach, respect the ocean. There's a great texting campaign you can get to get updated with beach conditions. And if you didn't know, those are the coasters that are on your seat. So he's going to, I don't want to steal his thunder, but there's a lot of information this county does. Unlike a lot of counties in the whole country, you have access to a lot of really good information in their county. Wind, Director pointed it out. We can lose lives due to wind. It's been a while, especially North Carolina, eastern North Carolina. Frame in '96 was the last major hurricane we had. Infrastructure issues, power outages, days and weeks, and then falling trees on our homes. That's where most lives were lost. And then, so that's reflected in the categories. Important. Traditionally, it's water, water, water. And then tornadoes. This is Tropical Storm Hermine, so not even a category rating. And in this tiny home down in Harris Village, they got the tornado warning and were able to seek better shelter than where they currently were. Any landfalling hurricane, those outer winds, as they first move on shore, you get tornadoes. And again, it's something that you're probably not out shopping, but have your real weather radio, have your phone charged up, make sure it's not on do not disturb, so that you can quickly seek better shelter. Director Brennan did a great job about this. I'll just highlight it again. Nearly half our deaths are occurring after the storm. So we're doing great with preparedness. You gotta keep doing it. But if you've never been on a ladder, let your kids or neighbors do it. You get a generator, no not to use it inside. Carbon monoxide does kill people. We have lost people in our eastern North Carolina area due to infection. The water is nasty. You don't want to be transmitted through flood waters. We have septic systems. I'll leave it at that. If you decide to leave, stay away. If you decide to stay put. Do not be in a rush to clean up, to go out and do things. Does that make sense? And just remember, nearly half of our deaths are happening after the storm. So that's why we kind of mentioned this over and over. So now, about a minute, I'm going to turn it over to Drew. I feel a little, not overwhelmed, but maybe for a new resident, you got all this stuff coming at you. So just let's go back to the bare basics. What can you do now? You took the time on a nice day to come here about this information. You already did step 1. Step 2 is go do something about it. Get your bottled water this weekend, get your canned goods, share this YouTube link with a neighbor. Remember not to pay attention to just the category, pay attention to the impacts, and then enjoy where we live. We don't need to worry about this in terms of we can't control whether we see a storm or not. You have zero control over that, trust me. What you do have control over is your kids, your evacuation plan, and your family. Control that, and the rest will work out. So just enjoy the area, and please make those preparedness picks first. So that's it. I'll be happy to take questions while I hand it over to Drew. I'll load up this presentation. That's my email. We love giving talks like this. We're trying to push more into churches and other avenues so people hear it. And this will be posted on YouTube probably tomorrow, so please share it. But if there's any questions, I'll take them. Otherwise, I'm going to pass it off to Mr. Drew, and I'm going to load up his presentation.
Any questions for her? I'm going to be hopefully short and concise. Not that they weren't. But I'm going to, my son's off, I'm going to say, if they really great kid, I get to put a little frosting on it with the beer. So I just want to say, started off and I said $4. That's what we get $4 for each of us every year to the National Weather Service. I know there's concerns what's going on everywhere across our nation, but I can pick up the phone and call the Weather Service tomorrow. They're going to tell me what's going to happen. I'm not worried about Weather Service right now. I'm worried about the future. So please talk to your elected officials. $4. That's what it takes. Please keep driving up the need for our National Weather Service. So, any questions, sir? Yeah, that's terrible. It's even hard to follow two presenters like that. I'm going to do my best here. My topic is get ready. Eric's already put a lot of information in. Mike Brennan's done that as well. I'm going to say, I don't need these slides, but I put it in there anyway. Look, they're almost the same as Mike Brennan said, so they're right there. It only takes one storm, so keep that in mind. We haven't had one in a while, we're going to have it. Maybe this year, maybe next year, but it only takes one. With that said, I'm going to ask you to do seven simple things we do right now. Determine your risk. Really is good. You really did a great job. Not just the risk of the environment, but things that are happening now. But know your risks. Every spot in our county is a storm surge hazard. You might not think that if you live up on 120 feet above sea level. Now, I live on some of the shores and off the whole block. Yes, I'm up 20 feet, but the people are down at 10 feet or only, there's water around an island. Well, those can get to you. You're going to be stuck there. You're going to be there by yourself. Storm surge is going to back you. Talk about that in the evacuation plan. Where we go, where we stay. I can't say it enough. Everybody stole the words from me. They go, I have visitors. My wife's going to visit my kids when we got evacuated. They're going to go somewhere. In New Jersey, I can go visit them. They're going to go visit them. That's not where you're going to go. Make sure it's not a shelter. Make sure it's not a shelter. I'm going to give you one more time. Make sure it's not a shelter. I say it 3 or 4 more times. I'm going to continue to do this. But major disaster supplies, we're going to make a slide on there. I'll show you another way to get your supplies to get what you need. It's not a whole bunch of hurts. I think you have 3 days up there. If you live up on the northern Outer Banks, 3 might be okay. If you live on the Hanover Sound, 8 weeks. That's tough. Get it ready. Have it ready for you to go. You might be there for a while. If you don't follow our mandatory evacuation order, you're going to be on your own. You're going to need that stuff. I mean, have that stuff ready. It might be 3 to 5 days good. If you're in an isolated area, where you know you got to off. Get an insurance stuff. There's somebody from insurance here. So I'm going to talk about insurance. This one takes care of your stuff. You and your insurance. If you can afford the insurance, get the insurance. Get the insurance checkup. Make sure you have the homeowner's policy. Make sure it's right. Make sure it's covered here. If you don't have flood insurance, get it. Get it now because it takes 30 days to come back. Make sure you got that insurance in place. Because that's take care of your stuff. Look out for people. Down to yourself to take care of your stuff. Straighten your home, go around, make sure everything's in good order. Doors are closed and windows are closing. Around outside your home, make sure it's cleaned up, ready to go. You don't want stuff flying. You back door into your house when the wind's pick up. Make sure your home's in good order. Straighten your home. I've lived here about 11 years now. I'm always amazed at how we take care of each other. It's an amazing community. Be ready to help your neighbor. If you're new to the community, ask your neighbor if they've been involved. If you've been here forever, reach out, find out what's going on with people. Be ready to help each other. And if you got special needs, I'll slide and tell you about. I just sign up and get on the registry about that. Bullet number 7, I think, was important. Write it down. How worried are you when Eric says, we've got to do it today right now? Guess what? Mike Brennan is on Facebook Live. We're getting ready to get a new storm we've never seen before. Yeah, we're starting to convert you. Start to do it as you can. If you wrote down your plan, or there anything down you can refer to it, and you can have sensible days to get through it. So write down. Chairman Woodard, he gets a lot of questions decisions are made. It's really a simple process. It's really a well thought out process. Video on it, so I'm going to show you that video. As I said earlier, Chairman Woodard will see his face here, you'll see mine, you'll see Bobby Allen, you'll see some other folks that are not in those elected positions anymore. This is replacing the person with it, so it doesn't matter whose face is up there, it's not the position. Here's a little video about how we make the decisions about it.
On this delicate sandbar, emergencies happen every day and tough decisions need to be made. Most days, those decisions are made by first responders who take action and solve problems quickly using the authority and resources they have at hand. But what happens when an emergency exceeds their capabilities or has the potential to bring widespread impacts to a county across the entire county? Impacts can come from anywhere: a storm, a man-made disaster, a public health crisis, an act of terror, civil unrest, or a chemical release, just to name a few. When we are facing widespread or severe damage, injury, loss of life or property, how are decisions made to keep our communities safe?
In North Carolina, counties and towns operate under authority granted by state statute. For emergencies, North Carolina General Statute 166A, the Emergency Management Act, provides the authority and responsibility that local governments have to prevent, prepare for, respond to, and recover from emergencies. The Act defines an emergency as an occurrence or imminent threat of widespread or severe damage, injury, or loss of life or property resulting from any natural or man-made threat or hazard. County is responsible for emergency management efforts to include coordinating activities with towns. To meet this responsibility, counties and towns establish emergency management agencies, expend funds to keep people and property safe, implement emergency management plans, provide emergency management response resources, and declare state of emergency when needed to ensure public health and safety. The county or town declare a state of emergency when they believe the emergency exists or is imminent. And there, each town in the county has an emergency management ordinance that designates the authority to declare a state of emergency to the town's mayor, chair of the board of commissioners, or their designee. While these individuals have the authority to declare a state of emergency and impose prohibitions and restrictions, they need the best information available to make the best possible decisions to protect public health and safety.
When an emergency has occurred or is on the horizon, we turn to our emergency operations plan. The plan, required by Chapter 92 of the Dare County Code, provides a framework that brings decision makers, subject matter experts, and others together to share information and coordinate decision making. In the plan, we use the term senior leaders to identify decision makers who have the authority to declare the local state of emergency and impose restrictions and prohibitions. The term is also used to describe others who have authorities they can use independently to protect public health and safety. The National Park Superintendent and the Dare County Sheriff have authorities outside of the Emergency Management Act, making them key senior leaders who routinely collaborate and coordinate actions with the chair of the Dare County Board of Commissioners and our town. When challenges arise and actions are needed to ensure public health and safety, our senior leaders, along with other key personnel, come together. They meet either in person or virtually and receive briefings from subject matter experts on what to expect, ways to mitigate impacts, and how best to protect our community. While we always focus on ensuring public health and safety, we never set aside how actions taken impact business and community activities. Often, senior leaders will reach out to key partners and community leaders to gather information to keep them informed about decisions and the circumstance. A state of emergency may be declared. While no one wants to impose prohibitions and restrictions, we know that without those we serve may be put unnecessarily in harm's way. While these senior leaders has independent authority, either from the Emergency Management Act or other statutes, that allows them to take actions on their own. They always strive to reach consensus. Once decisions are made, they are captured in a written state of emergency declaration that is quickly communicated to the public and implemented. As the situation changes, decision makers agree, changes are needed, the declaration is updated with prohibitions and restrictions being added or removed. These efforts continue until the emergency no longer threatens public health and safety. When an emergency crosses jurisdictional boundaries or is anticipated to bring widespread impacts to the county, a state of emergency may be signed by the chair of the board of commissioners, outlining all decisions and detailing who provided consent. Often towns issue their own declaration declaration signed by their mayor. At times, a declaration may be issued by just the county or the town.
Just like the everyday decisions made by a lifeguard, law enforcement officer, firefighter, emergency medical technician, or 911 call taker to save lives and protect property. Senior leaders are empowered to take action to ensure public health and safety when our community is facing widespread or severe damage, injury, or loss of life or property. These are tough decisions made with the best information available, subject matter experts, key stakeholders that lead to actions that protect our community until emergency conditions are no longer present. For more information, visit www.darenc.com/emergency management.
I think what we've done that informative, that gives you information on how we make decisions. In there, you saw we had a guy like this, point, that was Scott Kennedy, he was the National Weather Service forecaster, who deployed out to be with us in the EOC to give those detailed briefings to the senior leaders when they needed the information about the orient and provide information to our community right from the EOC. So the Weather Service does a lot for this $4 from each of us every year. They put people with us when we need most in our EOCs. But with that said, what's my risk? That was the number one I asked. I thought God that Eric thought about. If you live in an X zone, then you're at risk of flooding. You know what an X zone is? You live in an X zone, you are at risk of flooding. X zone is the only term for flood insurance purposes. X zone do flood. So please, if you don't know what flood zone you're in, you don't know if you need flood insurance, visit, take a look at it, think about flood insurance, but more importantly, know that even if you're in an X zone, you may still flood. We talked a little bit about storm surge already. I just want to show you another video, explain a little bit, hopefully, as quickly as it can, what it actually means, and how you can find out what the water levels are doing. So with that, here's another quick video.
Most people know what to expect and do when the National Weather Service issues severe weather watches and warnings. When a hurricane warning is issued, they know it's time to finish preparations and evacuate. Since hurricane force winds are expected in the next 36 hours, making outdoor activity unsafe. But not everyone knows what to do when a storm surge watch or warning is issued, or just how life-threatening storm surge can be.
I'm Jay, Deputy Director with the National Center. Did you know that storm surge is often the deadliest and most hazardous part of a hurricane? And while our ability to forecast part on this hazard has dramatically improved over the years, we're now working on public awareness with our partnership with Dare County.
Now, new technology, interactive displays on the outer banks are able to change.
Over the past 10 years, storm surge forecasting has really changed the hurricane center. We started to use depth of weather. And as we started to see those products come out, we started to see people going, what's that actually mean? And then we had some storms that impacted us here on Bay Drive. Storms were like, where we saw rapid rising water levels that were forecast to be 2 to 4 feet above ground. And we had a lot of people getting impacted. Their cars got flooded, no water into them. They felt like they weren't informed about how deep it was going to get. But we needed to help people understand what those forecast products mean and really how people might be.
As Director of Emergency Management for Dare County, Drew Pearson began to develop a new kind of display, one that could easily be understood by every passerby.
We want to make people aware of how deep it might get by putting this pole out, frequent increments, but we also put an interpretive display out that explains not just the pole, but the products that are put out by the Hurricane Center. So we're hopeful that people can come out, take a look at the displays, take a look at how deep it might get. And they can realize when they say there's going to be 1 to 3 feet of storm surge in their community, it's going to get up there.
Each color on the 12-foot pole represents 3 feet of water above ground. The eye-catching colors are the same ones used by the National Hurricane Center on their inundation maps.
I'm truly hopeful that every visitor, person who comes to the Outer Banks who sees one will know what they need to do when the storm surge forecast is issued to protect their lives and property. Our mission will be complete if we don't have cars inundated with water, if we don't have people stuck in their homes, as rapid rising water comes around their home, comes up into their living spaces. And
coalition completed, we have people saying, I saw that display, I knew what I needed to do when the forecast came out.
The storm surge poles have been placed in 27 locations around the Outer Banks, including town halls, beach access, ferry terminal, and sound access.
The storm surge, we have a new partnership with their county. We are so excited. We are actually going to get a storm surge pole that we can use to demonstrate both on media interviews, tours, to actually show those water levels.
While understanding storm surge is important, actually knowing when water levels are changing is just as critical. To improve water level monitoring and alerting, Dare County has installed 12 new floodgates. The gates will become part of North Carolina's emergency management statewide effort to support risk-based decisions regarding flooding using the flood inundation mapping and alerting network, also known as FIRE.
These flood inundation mapping and alerting networks is the gates that we're having installed. There's a box that's installed on the side of here. It's got a sensor that comes out. In that sensor, it sends a signal down to the water, and it comes back in. And then it changes, the signal distance changes, and it tells us whether it's going up or down.
Anyone who water levels and sign up first. Local climate gauges at climate.nc.gov. In addition to used by the general public, the National Weather Service uses gauge information to refine their forecast and warning products.
Dare County's new gauges are adding tools to our toolbox that can help us with rising ocean and sound side water level rises. We're so excited about the new real-time water level information that's available. Having it will help us improve our forecast products, which will help us carry out our mission of protecting life and property.
With better ways to measure floodwaters and increased awareness of what surging waters can do, hopefully Outer Banks locals and visitors will now know what to do in the event of a storm surge warning.
Actually, leave today, I didn't interfere because one of our poles were displays. So, do me a favor, stop by, take a picture in front of it, tweet it, put it on Instagram. There's Mike and Eric posts it. If you share it, other people know about it. But please share the information about storm surge displays and warnings. And there's a little more in my presentation about climate in a minute. That's what some people talk about. Climate's changed a little bit. It's a little bit more modern. You can sign up for it still. But we do have evacuation zones in the county. How many do you think we have? 2, that's right. One that covers all the hazardous items. The other ones, that's A, B is everywhere else. We have 2 zones. We have routes out of the county. What do you think they are? We're lucky enough, it's pretty easy to get in and out. But I was 64, 158. If you go to up to 540, you're not going to see traffic. If you decide you need to get out to the west, go out to 64, get out to the west, be out there quick. But it's easy to get in and out. We joke a little bit, we evacuate every weekend. We turn over 100,000 people. So when people ask me about evacuation routes, we do it. You know, it's, but we need you to get up and go. We don't ask you to go, we permit for evacuation. We ask you to do it. Routes needs to get in. You have a plan. Okay, I talked about it earlier, I didn't again. I can remember, I'm going to go to the EOC, my wife is going to go somewhere else. But have that plan. Get that in place. Get your kit, have some place to go. Because I said, I was going to say, don't have a shelter as your primary spot. Go visit that family and friends. Have them laid out. Know where you're going to go. Make that plan that doesn't include a shelter. Okay? Because there's no amenities in a shelter. You will be safe, but you may not have bed. Food might just a place a couple hours to eat. You'll be safe, but make that plan. Go somewhere else that doesn't include a shelter. Write the family in. If you need help with that, you can visit ReadyNC. Eric showed up his great website. Our state has a website as well, readync.gov. All the information you need to develop your kits. You can also get where there's, if all fails, you need to get to a shelter, you can still go to there. They'll show you where the shelters are open. But what did I say? Don't go to a shelter. And it doesn't take you to a shelter. Okay? But if you needed it, it's still there, the information there, readync.gov. Or the best site in the world, this is another option. Do something?
Yeah. You're good.
Yeah, we talked about, one of the other things is if you need help in it, look out for each other. It's another video that talks about our special needs registry program. It's for anybody. It allows us to reach out and help people who might need help. They need help. So I'm going to play it. It's from our social services director. It gives you good information about it.
I'm Chuck Lysak, Director of the Division of Social Services, the Dearborn County Services. The Special Medical Needs Registry is an emergency preparedness tool used by Dearborn County, communicating with medically fragile individuals for treatment and if needed for evacuation. Our human services unit oversees the registry for Dearborn County residents. Who should register for the Special Medical Needs Registry? Dearborn County residents who would need assistance with medical care or personal care, evacuation or hurricane, those who may need assistance finding sheltering during a storm due to their physical and or mental impairments. The registry is not just for the elderly population in their county. It's not just for social services clients. Participation in the registry is voluntary. All information will be kept private and confidential. Also, anyone who uses oxygen or receives dialysis is strongly encouraged to register. These are two critical needs that can be impacted if access is limited to the event or if power is lost during the event. The Special Medical Needs Registry is important because Dearborn County and local municipality officials also need to know where the areas where the vulnerable residents are so that they can contact them quickly before and after an emergency occurs. Once you register, you will remain on the registry and do not need to re-register each year. Each May, a social worker will contact you to verify. Each time an event is approaching, you will be contacted. Based on the information you provided, we will work with you to make sure you are ready to implement your evacuation plan. We will remind you to take your essential medications and medical supplies, medical equipment, any special food you require, important documents, and a driver's license or other identification. If an evacuation is ordered, we can assist with transportation to a shelter. Individuals who require a dialysis will be evacuated to a location in proximity to these services. As a reminder, plan ahead for disasters. Resources can be very limited during. In addition to registering for the special medical needs, it is important that you take a few minutes to register for the experts and create a smart 911 profile. By completing both, you will receive public safety and routine alerts and notifications from local officials, and we will be able to review your potential needs as we prepare for a storm. Finally, develop your evacuation plan now, including where you will go and how you will get there. If you or someone you know may benefit from being added to the Special Medical Needs Registry, please visit darenc.gov/special needs or call the Division of Social Services 475.
It's a great program we have, and as Mike and Eric mentioned, we do a lot in our county. We're lucky enough. That's an option that many counties don't provide. That is a great resource for. We hit on this already a couple of times. Getting official information. Know your trusted sources of information. It's a weather.gov, whether you love, I don't have to pitch and monitor, but we got all the experts. Sign up for our notifications. We're lucky enough to have Dorothy Hester, public information officer. I'm just going to share a little bit about Dorothy Hester. She's one of the few master public information officers in the country. Handful in North Carolina. She has great skill set, getting information out, getting it to people who need it, and a team that gets it there in the best way possible. I can't tell you all the social media ways. I have no idea what they are. I'll tell you to go do something, go out there and take a picture, share it. Dorothy's got the team in place to share information. We're lucky in there. We together every part of the county to get that information out. I do hope you trust us as you trust the source of information. If you don't, come talk to me, Dorothy. We want to make you trust us. I want to give you a hug, say trust us. We care about you. We want to give you the best information possible. Know your trusted sources of information. Who signed up for OBX alerts already? Yeah, I'm not gonna show you, I'll put through the videos. You can go to OBXalerts.com, sign up alerts, we'll get them. The integrated public warning system up there, we are able to set off your phones, make them vibrate, to give you information about evacuations, and we do that. I have no weather radio. If you don't have a phone, if you don't have an OBX alerts, you still like radio, it'll weather radio. It'll alert you when there's a warning issue. It still works, it's great stuff. On your phones, if you don't have government alerts turned on, turn them on. And if there is a chance of a storm coming our way, leave it plugged in and turned on with your alerts on, because if the weather service issues a flash flood watching warning, or a flash flood warning, rather, they issue a flash flood warning, if they issue a tornado warning, a hurricane watch, a storm surge warning, it's going to make your phone wake you up. It's going to tell you there's a problem you can take action. So please make sure you have those government alerts. So I'm going to skip this one. This is all about OBX alerts. We talked a little bit about this already, and it's really amazing to see the Hurricane Center have a river current product on the Hurricane Center page now. To me, that's great, because we've lost lives. Mike and Eric talked about how many lives we lost in North Carolina. We can, not just for hurricanes, but if we have family and friends come to visit us, love the beach, respecttheocean.com. Love the beach, respect the ocean. Respect that ocean. Get alerts from local ocean rescue folks. If you're going to event here at 7 o'clock about an accident, ocean rescue service, video in here, but you can sign up for those. And each and every day you'll get the forecast for what's going on the beach. If you're not going to the beach, they get family coming in. Oh, it's going to be a red flag day. And they go to the website and understand what. So it's great information for you all. More importantly, so please share that. We always get asked about the entry. I just got to drive home. Decisions are driven by public safety. Mike Brennan said it, you're never say it, now you're going to say it. We're not going to open up, we're going to open up as quickly and as efficiently as we can, as long as it is safe. We don't want people coming back and being aggressive. We know everybody wants to get home. We know you might be going to the rock and not the way. And you want to get back and find out what's going on in your home. We want you to get back to a place that is safe. We want to live, not maybe perfect, but safe, so we can get you back. And we do use a stage entry process to bring you back. We want to get our first responders back, so we can start getting the hospital done and going like that. Perfect residents, critical business, we want to get you back, so you get back into your homes. And we're really starting to open up those businesses, so we can start our recovery. Then we bring back our non-resident property owners. This is how we open up general stuff. It can take a long time. It's not because we want it to take a long time. It's because we want it to be safe and we start to bring people back. But it's all driven by public safety. And I know Chairman Wood, he's all about public safety. He told me that when he was walking in. It's not public safety. He told me that out of the mark. It's not about anything else. It's not public safety. It's evacuation order. Start bringing people back. It'll take a long time. You get rid of comments online. If you're a Dare County resident, you have a Dare County driver's license, you should have to check it. If you're a Dare County resident and you don't have a Dare County driver's license, you can show your voter registration card. So easy to get that, but it doesn't take a long time. So with that, I got two really short videos that are don't be taught, be dead. Okay, this is storm surge.
And you can't realize the house like it starts floating. Everything floats. You can't get in the hallway. You got to fight to get where you go. I just watched it. I saw Jeff.
I say be Debbie because Debbie did something. She back.
when the word came out, there was mandatory evacuation, we evacuated. There might not be here who had. I just still not, I don't think, processed it yet.
Both Tom and Debbie were impacted by Hurricane Michael, 2018, I believe that was, if I remember correctly. And we had, like, I'm sure we were that right at his house, and they did drive, that's why we wrote that storm surge presentation. By that home. And the good news is, that Mike Brennan, the American remember lost the storm surge. We can't let our guard down. We still got to keep talking about it, we still got to keep that message going, run for the water hydrant. But with that said, I'm done. We'll be exploring storm surge and our budget chair.